Chris, welcome to Mind Body Peak Performance.
Nick, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to kind of dive into the exciting world of carbon. Is that somehow exciting?
It can be. And if you look at it through the right angle, it will be. So before we get started on that today, tell me something controversial about carbon or supplements or anything in your line of expertise.
Yeah, so something controversial. I think probably the biggest scope is, and we'll get into the story. How I actually didn't want to be in the supplement industry, and how I was kind of dragged into it, and part of the reasons that I didn't want to be in the supplement industry was that it has some concerning elements in the supplement industry. We'll just put that. And so one of the things that I like to point people towards is Amazon is a great place to buy things. It's not a great place to evaluate supplements, right? So if you look at, I don't know, we'll just take vitamin C, right? That's a very common supplement. And you go out there and you're like, oh, this has 5-star ratings. This must be a really good vitamin C. Like, what does it really mean to have a 5-star rating for vitamin C? We know it doesn't mean a couple of things. That they probably on a scientific scale didn't weigh each tablet and confirm that it was 1 gram or whatever the appropriate amount was. They probably didn't even count the tablets, right? If it says 90 and it's not mostly empty, then they probably assumed that it has 90 tablets in it. They certainly didn't crush up the tablets, assuming like it could be crushed, and take it to their HPLC and confirm that it was ascorbic acid. So I jokingly say, like, a 5-star rating on supplements on Amazon really means that the individual did not pass before Amazon was able to convince them to leave a review. So you really unfortunately have to do your research when it comes to supplements, and know the history behind the company, and have a company that the leadership and you trust the leadership, and you've got to operate from that point, because anything else is you're kidding yourself if you think a 5-star review. By the way, it's great, like an Android phone, a 5-star Android phone rating, like they've used it, they like it, or iPhone, whatever, whichever camp you're in, that makes sense. It just doesn't make sense for supplements, and I think a lot of people don't think about it that way.
Definitely. And especially around Amazon, there have been multiple major controversial, like scam. I don't want to say scams, but basically scams where third party tests what's in the product itself. And it's a completely different ingredient in some cases. Sometimes it's less. Sometimes it has adulterants and contaminants and other things. And in certain circumstances, the company themselves they don't even sell on Amazon. It's a third party who counterfeited their product and has the same label and packaging and everything. But if you call the company themselves and you talk to their reps, they're like, oh no, we don't sell on Amazon. We don't approve any sales on Amazon. And when you come to investigate, it's actually not what you think it is, and who knows what you're actually consuming. So I love Amazon, but not necessarily for supplements.
You have a blog on your homepage, right? I think regarding that, right? That's probably partially why it triggered the first thing that came to mind, because I was looking at that.
Yeah. Well, tell me so far today the non-negotiables you've done for your health, your performance, and your bioharmony.
All right. So if we think in terms of health, there's 2 things. So I have a personal trainer who comes to the house on Wednesdays and Fridays. The other days I was running. I'm having some knee pain, and so now I'm biking. So those are, the word non-negotiable. I'm an engineer, so I really don't have, like, by education, I really don't have it's 0 or 100%, right? It's pretty close to, it's as close as I get to non-negotiable. So yeah, so I trained. Also meditated. I was looking at my meditation app. I've actually done quite a few. I don't even remember what the number was, but I was like, wow, that's a lot of meditation minutes. And that feels really good. So I think I've got 2 of those. Did I miss one?
Nope. Health, performance, and bioharmony. Those all fit squarely into those definitions.
Yeah. Those are the things. I really do work hard to have physical exercise every morning. And I love the phrase regarding meditation, that if you are too busy to meditate for 10 minutes a day, you probably need 20.
Tell me about your backstory. How did you get involved in the supplement industry despite not wanting to go into it?
All right. So, back in 1985, three scientists here in Houston actually discovered the third form of carbon. And that third form of carbon, for those of you watching, is this soccer ball shaped molecule. If you're just listening, that's fine. It's literally, if you imagine a soccer ball, a traditional soccer ball, the lines on the soccer ball represent the bonds between the carbon atoms. You have a spherical molecule of 60 carbon atoms. The three scientists who discovered it in 1985, and then they won the Nobel Prize in 1996 for that discovery. So a short 11 years from discovery to actually being awarded the Nobel Prize. Between that time, so in 1991, my business partner and I created equipment, started manufacturing this molecule, and started selling it to research institutions around the world. Now, why did these guys win the Nobel Prize? This molecule is absolutely amazing. The way I describe it is it performs as well or better than the current best material in almost every application. So better inks, better tires, better batteries, better photocells. Now, you might be getting nervous because, yes, we are talking about a supplement. And yes, I just mentioned ink, battery, tires, photocells. Those are things that people don't tend to think of. Hey, let me go, mine the battery in my car and see what kind of things I should be consuming on a daily basis. But don't worry, the story's going to get worse first, and then it's going to get a lot better. So they actually thought anytime you have a molecule or a substance or whatever it is that has such amazing benefits, and this is in the industrial space, then you kind of picture that man is going to be working with it regularly, and you have to do what's called toxicity studies on them. You have to understand, hey, can you hold it? Can you touch it? Can you breathe it? Like, if we're going to be working with this on a regular basis, what are the criteria that we can work on it? They actually thought the molecule, this is the bad part, would be toxic for various reasons. The shapes on the exterior of that soccer ball shaped molecule are reminiscent of benzene. Benzene is absolutely paramount for modern society. We don't have modern society without benzene. Plastics, detergents, most medicines, a lot of modern society is based on the benzene ring. But benzene on its own is known to be toxic and a carcinogen. So they thought this soccer ball shaped molecule would be toxic. They put it in a toxicity study. They published the results of that study in 2012. And instead of being toxic, well, in this study, they gave test subjects, in this case, it was Wistar rats, water as the control group, olive oil as one of the kind of pseudo control groups, and then olive oil with this molecule. Now, we call this molecule for consumption ESS60. So they gave rats water, olive oil, and then olive oil with ESS60. Instead of being toxic, the test subjects that they gave the olive oil with the ESS60, really it's the My Vital C formula to, lived 90% longer than the control group. Yeah, the single longest longevity experimental result in history. And that's kind of the publication that shifted me from being, if there is such a thing, and I am, if there is such a thing, a happy-go-lucky carbon nanomaterial scientist, into getting into the supplement industry. And I really think, and I'll talk a little bit about how we worked to not get into the industry, but I think people get into the industry usually one of two ways. The one, they wake up, they decide they want to be wealthy, and they decide they want to do it with supplementation, and hopefully they're putting out good products. And I have no problem with people being wealthy. It's just not how I ended up here. The other is somebody who has their own kind of health challenges, maybe the health challenges of a loved one, and now they're out to save the world. Hopefully, it doesn't surprise you. I am not against people saving the world. It's just not how I ended up here. I have been manufacturing this crazy soccer ball shaped molecule since 1991. They published this toxicity study in 2012. And I'll talk a little bit about the journey, and then finally we get into the industry, and finally I'm in the supplement industry. But that's kind of the long and short of the picture of how I ended up in the supplement industry.
I certainly want to dig into some of the science and to also underscore what you just said, an impressive 90%, is it lifespan
Yeah,
elongation?
yeah.
And at the same time, they were expecting toxicity out of this molecule, and it had a very different effect. And for reference, like the gold standard of life extension protocols, such as caloric restriction, exercise, a lot of these things that are like common and fairly well studied for their role on extending quality of life over those final years throughout the total lifetime, aka also health span. Like these have very 10 to 30% improvements in lifespan. And this one molecule alone with nothing else, 90%.
90%. Yeah, I like to kind of joke. You're right. The next best research way to live longer is calorie restriction. So we're not talking intermittent fasting, it's calorie restriction. And I call that the starve yourself 1/3 to death diet. And it's known that if you reduce your calorie consumption by 30%, you can extend your life by 30%. For some reason, not that many people sign up for the starve yourself 1/3 to death diet. Maybe it's a PR thing, a marketing thing.
Yeah, and you're living every single day cold, hungry, and libidoless.
Yeah. Wow, that sounds wonderful. Where do I sign? And sir, for the low, low price of X, you can sign right here and have all of these amazing joys.
Yeah, I'm curious about the actual molecule. Why 60? Like, I understand where it gets its name, but why is the 60? Like, why does that have miraculous properties?
Well, okay, so there's a couple things. Let me talk first about the discovery because I think that's really interesting. The Nobel Prize winners, there are three professors, Dr. Smalley, Dr. Curl, and Dr. Kroto. Dr. Kroto was an astrophysicist and had noticed one spectrum out in space that he couldn't identify, but suspected it was carbon. And so he came to Rice University here in Houston, where Dr. Smalley and Dr. Curl worked together, had a piece of equipment that does something nifty. What it does is it shows a laser on a substrate. In this case, it would be carbon, and then takes a puff of inert gas and takes those molecules that come off, that vapor that comes off, into a mass spectrometer so that you can then see what are the clusters that are created. The theory with carbon was that it would just make these flat sheets, these graphene sheets or graphite sheets, right? So graphene has got a lot of press. That I could have mentioned that in terms of controversy because there's a lot of controversy around graphene. Um, what they noticed, actually, what one of the grad students noticed was that there was a slight peak at C60, at carbon 60.
Mm.
And the question is, if you're just making exactly identical flat sheets, why would you have a flat sheet of 60 versus 59 or 61? And the answer ultimately was like this amazing discovery for which they won the Nobel Prize. But in that moment, they're like, there's just no reason that 60 should be preferential. So now you get this 60 card. Once you get that closed cage, and there's a really good book called the Most Beautiful Molecule, which is entirely about the discovery and the technology behind it. It's just an amazing book, and it talks about this kind of quintessential movie moment where Dr. Smalley is putting all the pieces together, and the 30 pieces make a ball, and he drops it, and it bounces. Right, like this is Nobel Prize winning moment, right? So that's the carbon 60 and kind of the history there. If you think in terms of what potential benefits might come off of this, right? So these rats live 90% longer. People ask regularly, "Hey, why might they live longer?" And really, if you look at the medical community, it thinks of aging typically in terms of two things: inflammation and oxidation. Our product can tick both of those boxes, and so I'll talk to you a little bit about that. In the very early days, so back in the 90s when this molecule was discovered, it was understood that it could hold up to 6 electrons, so 6 negatively charged particles, and that'll carry forward here in a little bit. That's why it makes good battery material. It's actually cost competitive with lithium. I'm very hopeful that someday we have Bucky batteries, just because that sounds really, really, really amazing. So those 6 electrons come into play as a supplement, as an antioxidant, because our bodies have these oxidative products, these reactive oxygen species. They're negatively charged particles. They're the things that run around and do this aging damage if they're not mitigated. And then now we've got this ESS60 molecule that can hold on to this. And I'm going to talk about that because there's some pretty spectacular ideas about how this ESS60 molecule, I like to call it the boss. It's a buffering oxidative stress system. So we'll get into that. But okay, so we really do check the antioxidant. There's an ad hoc study on the web that shows it to be 172 times more powerful than vitamin C. There's actually peer-reviewed published research that shows it to be 125 times more powerful than vitamin C. So check, right? We are an antioxidant. When it comes to inflammation, you have to be really careful, and this is appropriately careful, with the FDA guidelines. What the FDA does allow us to say is that our product has a positive impact, right? So it addresses inflammation, at least as it relates to exercise-induced inflammation. So we've all had like a tough workout or a long walk that's much longer than usual and kind of woke up the next day and just felt this sense of inflammation. We definitely are able to say that we address that type of inflammation. What the FDA won't allow us to say is that we address any other kind of inflammation. And as a scientist, I believe that's the appropriate angle. As a person who's trying to share this story, it can be frustrating, but certainly it's the right scientific angle, because inflammation is so closely related with certain diseases that inherently, if you're talking about inflammation, you're actually talking about those diseases. And our product, here's the FDA disclaimer: our product has not been evaluated by the FDA. It's not intended to treat, diagnose, cure, or prevent any disease. So those are the two ones. And if you've got any questions, great. I can come back to the antioxidant because I think there's some powerful stuff there.
Well, yeah, I wanted to talk about both of those. And I actually want to push back a little bit on the inflammation. There's a bunch of different forms. I mean, inflammation is inflammation and it looks differently depending on where it is, how long it's going on, all that kind of stuff. And also at the same time, for most people under the right quantities, in the right circumstances, post exercise inflammation is a signaling mechanism in the body to bring about hormetic adaptations, to become bigger, faster, stronger, more athletic. So it's interesting that you can mention that, when that would be like the last one that I would want to work with and try and modulate. I'd be much more curious and optimistic about the other forms, because previous antioxidant research has shown blunting too much of the exercise induced inflammation can have a negative effect on training. And I get that you can't actually speak to the other forms of inflammation, but the research is there. And so if people are wanting to look around PubMed and other places, they can find papers detailing the effects of other forms of inflammation.
Yeah, it's interesting because I mentioned a knee pain that I have, and I went to an orthopedic surgeon. He looked at it, yanked on my knee a little bit. And he was like, everything's good. The X-rays look good. You should take, I don't know, 2 Advil twice a day. And in my mind, I was like, no, like if there's inflammation there, it does serve a purpose. Now, what you're talking about is kind of the difference between acute and systemic inflammation. And yeah, systemic inflammation is really, really ultimately what you want to deal with. I think it's not a big leap to understand that a lot of inflammation is going to have very similar signatures, and something that addresses one has the potential to address the other, which is really why I bring those things up. And I can share, I know we had a call before this, but I can't remember if I shared that we've got a 2-time US ultra running champion who takes our product. And so the way he speaks about it, it's not even necessarily inflammation, although it's the way he says it is, well, I'll just say, like, his quote is, "I don't believe it speeds exercise recovery. I believe it prevents damage in the first place." And this is a 2-time US ultra running champion. His name's Anthony Kunkel. He won a US championship at the 50-mile range and at the 100K range, which is 62 miles. And he said, the reason I believe that it prevents damage in the first place is on the last 5 miles of a 50-mile run. By the way, a phrase you don't hear very often.
Yeah.
In fact, I've only ever heard it from Anthony. Where strength and stability were previously a problem, they're no longer a problem. So there is something, and once we get into the boss theory, I think we can kind of, it'll circle back and explain some of these things.
Yeah, that makes sense. And especially when you're pushing the bounds of what the body is designed to do or can comfortably do, then you're not necessarily caring about all the extra adaptation, because once you pass a certain threshold, you're really just increasing the oxidative stress and the burden on the body. And anything you can do to like shield the body against that extra burden is going to pay back in spades. but perhaps it's not something you want to take with exercise if you're just doing short bursts of 15, 45 minutes of training a couple times a week.
Yeah, so Anthony, one of the things I really appreciate about him, and this may be true of many elite athletes, although it would surprise me just kind of the nature of understanding people, is he's super analytic, right? And he has diary. He actually does a lot of posts on Instagram. We work together regularly. He was actually here in Houston. He's working to qualify for the Olympics at the marathon pace, which is a lot short. Like it's a short run relative to his 50 miles, right? And so he's working on increasing his pace. And he talks about when he first, actually, the first call I had with him was very interesting because he's like, Chris, I started off with your product and I was only taking, one serving, a standard serving, which is 5 mils or 1 teaspoon. And I didn't really notice anything. And then because he is who he is, he tripled the servings. And this was on the phone with him. He's like, and wow, what a difference that made. Um, and he also kind of outlines, and I think I have a blog post about it, where he's talking about cycling on and off. Because part of him is like, okay, this is so beneficial to me. Am I creating a crutch? Am I actually weakening my system? And obviously he doesn't want to do that. And so he's cycled on and off. He tends to cycle on and off. He starts with MCT, with our MCT product. So we've got three main oils. We've got olive oil, avocado oil, and MCT. MCT is a great oil anyway for so many different reasons. You think in terms of like ketosis, but it does have the lowest concentration of the ESS60 molecule. So his current kind of cycling is he starts on MCT. It helps maintain hunger, right? Helps assuage his hunger because he's got to stay super lean when you're running these kinds of miles. Like every ounce matters, right? And then he'll ramp up as the race is coming. So I don't know if that kind of addresses what you're thinking. He actually does run on it. I don't know that he takes it the same day, but I think it's an either or. Like if he took it the same day, I don't think that has a negative impact, and probably doesn't need to because it does tend to reside in your body for about 10 days.
Oh, I didn't realize that.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, I talk to him pretty often on Instagram about random things he's up to, the different trials and tribulations he's undergoing at the moment. And it's cool to see that he's also been using this product, this technology for a while. One thing you mentioned is not only is there C60, but then there's this special form of C60 that you call ESS60. What is the difference between traditional C60 and this?
Yeah, so think in terms of C60 being for industrial applications, right? So that's was discovered 85, Nobel Prize in 96, and we've been manufacturing it since 91 and selling it to research institutions around the world for mostly industrial applications, right? Biology has certainly kicked in. Biological applications has certainly kicked in. Although even in the early days, it was understood, and there's patents related to this molecule preventing the AIDS virus from replicating, right? So there's a certain receptor on the AIDS virus that the soccer ball shaped molecule fits into, and by fitting into there, now that virus is not able to replicate. So that's in that instance, it's a known antiviral. So in terms of medical, that's been ramping up. So C60 industrial applications, and there is peer-reviewed published research that shows if you improperly process that C60, it is harmful. ESS60 is C60 that's been processed for safer human consumption. And if we go back to the story of how we got into this business, right? In 2012, they published this amazing study, 90% extension of life, the single longest longevity experimental result on mammals, right, ever. And we actually, that was published in mid 2012, mid 2013, we started getting phone calls and people, this is the wacky biohackers, and I can say that affectionately because I am one. Were calling us and going, hey, how much in a dose? And you have to think, put the perspective of, again, that happy-go-lucky carbon nanomaterial scientist. We've got our carbon nanomaterial scientist hat, and what we heard in that question was, hey, this stuff that you use in inks, batteries, tires, and photocells, how much of it should I consume? And we were unequivocal in those early days. We said zero. Now the research was clear that it was safe, but you work slow as a scientist. Like you move things into the body very slowly as a scientist. We actually added not for human consumption to our labeling in mid 2013. And from 2013 until 2017, that labeling stayed on there. So imagine from 1991 until 2013, we do not have not for human consumption on our labeling, right? It just wasn't necessary. We added, and really my business partner and I, and from that time, 2013 to 2012, my business partner and I were getting calls on a regular basis of people giving us amazing testimonials because they were taking it even though it said not for human consumption on it. This is wacky biohackers, right? And so my business partner and I would get together every quarter, every 6 months, and be like, okay, so what are we going to do with this? Is this something that we want to get into? And in that time span, I came across an article, and you may have come across the same article. It was a peer-reviewed published paper. I think they looked at 50 of the supplements that were on the market, and fully 50% of them did not have in them what they said they had in them, right? And this makes me nervous. We're selling carbon to research institutions around the world. When I sell a product to a research institution, whether if it's a private, they give it to their lab assistant. If it's a university, they give it to a grad student. They go in the back, they put it in their HPLC, they confirm that we shipped them what we told them we were going to ship them. This is the opposite of the supplement market, right? Like there's no scales, there's no testing. And so we really did push off and try not to get into the industry until the latter part of 2017. A guy with a really big YouTube following started talking about all the benefits he was getting taking it on a daily basis. And our phone went from ringing, twice a week to 10 times a day. And so my business partner and I go, well, one, this is an opportunity. Yes, we're carbon nanomaterial scientists. We're also entrepreneurs. This is an opportunity that's much bigger than we realized. And we really kind of felt an obligation, given that we have the lab, we provided the original material to that Paris University study. Like we were at the center of everything in terms of providing the highest quality product. And so we at the beginning of 2018 jumped into the market. Again, begrudgingly, but at this point we're like, hey, we've got to work to keep people safe. And that's really what this demarcation of ESS60 from C60 is all about.
Okay. So to summarize, ESS60 is it is safe for human consumption versus most C60 is for industrial applications and doesn't have the human safety data behind it. And in fact, might actually be dangerous.
Exactly. If it's definitely true. If it's improperly processed, it's dangerous. Yeah.
So Chris, will you tell me some more of those stories and the things people are reporting to you, the glowing testimonials, like why people reach out and what they're saying they're getting from using C60?
Yeah. I'll do a couple of my own. Yeah. And then it'll loop back with the boss theory. I think will be really kind of cool.
Mm-hmm.
So some of my own, our most consistent testimonial, this is across the board, is people take the product in the morning, they report mental focus and energy during the day, and then better sleep that night, right? So I'm not aware of anything that you can take in the morning that positively impacts your sleep at night. I'm aware of things you can do, right? So if you go exercise in the morning, you'll have a positive impact on your sleep that night. If you get exposure to sunlight, right, and get your circadian rhythm in line with the rising and falling of the sun, you'll have a positive impact on your sleep. But that is our most consistent testimonial. So for me, sleep looks like this, and I have to embarrassingly admit that when right before we started taking this product, right, so right about 2017, I've got boy girl twins, and I used to take 2 naps before noon on Saturdays and Sundays. And the way that would work is I would wake up, I'd go down and lay on the couch. Cartoons would be on. My kids would actually be physically sitting on top of me, right? Which another friend of mine pointed out, that's brilliant parenting because they can't get away without waking you up, right? Like, I don't know if brilliant's the right word, but it worked. So I would take that first nap, and then we would wake up, have breakfast, and then I would go back, resume the position, fall back asleep. And I literally, if we didn't have things to do, I took 2 naps on Saturdays and Sundays before noon. And when I started taking the product on, I'd take a nap every now and then. I probably take a nap, I don't know, once every 2 months or something now. And certainly it's more likely if we're traveling, right? Because traveling days are busy and you're off with really extremely busy days. But when I started taking the product, my kids are almost 13 now, so there's no cartoons and they're not sitting on me. I wouldn't be able to sleep anymore. But right after I started taking the product on a regular basis, I would go, sit on the couch, lay on the couch, and I just wouldn't sleep. Like I just don't need to sleep. And so I would get up and be productive. So that's one. We continually get people reporting improvements in skin and hair improvements, right? I don't want to get into any specifics, kind of FDA challenges. We do have a skin reduo set that's on our website. We've gotten some great feedback there. We actually incorporated another molecule that we call UTH29. It's a peptide that has 30 years of good results in peer-reviewed published research on skin and hair improvements. And so that's a product that we have out there.
That's cool. I'll have to look up that peptide. But are people ingesting this to get the skin benefits, or are they just applying it topically?
Let me tell you the journey, because we also have we've got a Reduo, which is a 2-part product, which is interesting, and I'll tell you about that. The history of us having skin products. So you already know I didn't want to be a supplement guy. Like I just wasn't like I'm happy selling carbon to like really boring carbon to scientists around the world. And then we get into the supplement industry. And I've got one of our business partners. When she would take the product, there'd be a little spillage, and she would take that and put it on her face. I actually have another distributor who I love this story. She said, her name's Sarah Banta. She said, Chris, this is the first call I had with her. I have to tell you, I have a skin lotion and serum addiction. I actually have a credit card that my husband doesn't know about so that I can buy skin and hair lotions and creams. And your product, and this is just the oil-based product, the consumable product is the best thing I've ever put on my face, right? So I got that testimonial, and with a lot of these testimonials, I'm like, Sarah, I believe you, but I don't know, like as a scientist, I don't know what to do with this data. Like it's anecdotal, like where is this going to take us? So our business partners consuming that product, putting some on her face, and she comes to me and says, we should do a skin serum, a face serum. And you can imagine how excited I was about doing face serums, having not wanting to get into the supplement industry. So she went out and she found a biologist who has her name's Brigitte Mars, who's put together, she's written, I don't know, 12 books on different plants. And she goes and meets with her to get like the fundamentals of the product. Brigitte is using chia seed oil as a base oil and something she's putting on her skin. And my business partner was like, well, you're looking amazing. Like we should start there. And then we add, right, the ESS60 molecule. So that product came out. I still wasn't convinced. I knew it was a quality product. I knew that. But the testimonials that came back from that, even from my wife, just blew me away, right? So, okay, great. This is a hit. About that time, my director of research came to me with this peptide, and he's like, hey, we should look at this because it's got 30 years of peer-reviewed published research related to skin and hair improvements. It's a water-based, and obviously our product is oil-based. We could have used emulsifiers to mix them, but I don't like emulsifiers. I don't like how they sound. Like Google them. It's not good stuff. And so we ended up with a 2-part product, which is really kind of cool. So it's the Skin Reduo, and then we've got the ESS60 activator. And what you do is you put, I can actually do this, right? You put 1 squirt, right? And then for each squirt, you put 2 drops of the activator. The activator, that was 2 drops, has a wonderful smell. And then you mix it. So you activate it right there, and then you just apply it, right? So the things that I'm targeting, back of my hands, right? I'm actually 53. I don't know if you knew that.
I didn't.
And then you put it on your face. So this product has been extremely well received also. So that's kind of the story into that. I don't know how we got down that tangent, and that was not my intent.
But if I consume it orally, am I also going to have an improvement to my skin and or hair?
If you just consume the olive oil based product, people have been reporting improvements to skin and hair. Absolutely. Like that's, and again, these are testimonials. I'm not making this claim. This, just assume this won't happen for you. If you're interested in trying it, great. But we've got testimonials of my hair is growing back in and it's growing its original color, right? And so it was pretty impressive, even just from the oral consumption. And the interesting thing about, you think, and people have reported, faster growing nails. The interesting thing about hair, skin to a lesser degree, but nails for sure, is those are so down the list of your body's, your physiology's survival mechanisms, right? Like hair and nails are about beauty, basically. And so if you're struggling with anything internally from a health perspective, your body's like, well, abort the hair, right? Like we don't need that. We just need to survive, and nails tend to grow slower. So when you think in terms of a product that's associated with the longest longevity experimental result, one, it would be very surprising if you would consume this and the only thing happened is you live longer. Like nothing else positive happens to you. That just doesn't make any sense, right? And then it makes sense that it's addressing, and now is the right time to talk about the boss theory, right? So the boss theory is, we know that this ESS60 molecule, and again, it's buffering oxidative stress system. We know that this molecule, this soccer ball shaped molecule, can get into the mitochondria. So we've got peer reviewed published research that supports it's in the mitochondria. We know it can hold 6 electrons, right? So we know it can be a great reactive oxygen species sponge. Current theory is this. In the mitochondria, right, it's the powerhouse of every cell in your body. The only cells in your body that don't have mitochondria are your blood cells, and you've got between 50 and 5,000 mitochondria in every other cell in your body. The job of the mitochondria is really to kind of take the food that we've eaten and then that's been processed and gotten into the blood system and convert that into ATP, the energy source that every cell needs. In order to be a good liver cell, kidney cell, whatever cell, it's got to have this ATP. We kind of fundamentally understand that as things go through energy production, they tend to produce things that are not so good. Your car driving down the street, exhaust. Your power plant, you've got the smokestack coming off of that. Well, the mitochondria is a place where reactive oxygen species are created. This is that detrimental thing that causes oxidation. And in the mitochondria, you've got 2 main antioxidants that take care of that. And that's the glutathione and the melatonin. Interestingly, it's the sleep hormone, right? Talking about our most consistent testimonial. So we know that any given mitochondria could get depleted of glutathione and melatonin. And when that happens, that's when these reactive oxygen species get out. So the way I look at this ESS60, this boss system, is imagine it's the end of a rowdy night on New Orleans, and the reactive oxygen species are running around and breaking windows and smashing cars and pulling down light poles. And the police, the glutathione and melatonin, are collecting them, handcuffing themselves to them, and taking them down to the police station, in this case, getting them out of your body. Well, if the glutathione and the melatonin, if the police get depleted, what do? Well, in New Orleans, they stick you in the paddy wagon, right? Like they just shove you there until they can do something. We know that this soccer ball shaped molecule can hold 6, and it can reversibly hold them. So it can hold them and prevent them from doing damage. And then when that particular mitochondria is able to replenish the glutathione and or the melatonin, those can then handcuff themselves to the reactive oxygen species and get them out of your body. So it ends up being a buffering system, not just an antioxidant, if I did a good job of explaining that.
Yeah, and then compare that to, say, vitamin C, like your standard antioxidant. How would that operate in the mitochondria if it can even penetrate, which I'm not sure it can?
Yeah, I don't think vitamin C gets in the mitochondria. So some of these reactive oxygen species, and they can be created other ways, but the mitochondria is kind of the productive piece of your body going through its normal functions that it tends to spit off reactive oxygen species. What what vitamin C will do when it comes to it, it'll actually bond irreversibly and then get it out of the body, right? And that's different than just being able to hold on to it and then ostensibly the ESS60 molecule could hold on to those. And if it's not in the mitochondria, then a vitamin C molecule could come around, ascorbic acid could come around and bond to it and get it out of the body.
Interesting. I'm much more of a fan of all reversible processes in the body. Anything that's irreversible, I have to think long and hard before doing, especially certain nootropics and drugs, because they usually carry heavier consequences, or at least potential consequences.
Yeah. And again, when just to kind of wrap this kind of in a bow, when people first were asking or were giving these amazing testimonials, and I say literally from head to toe, like faster growing hair, my toe healed faster. That's my wife's testimonial. So head to toe, what explains it? In the early days, I just explained it because our most consistent testimonial is people take it in the morning, mental focus and energy during the day, better sleep. If you get better sleep, everything's better, right? Sleep is good for your it's the most healing and restorative medicine you could possibly take, and it's free. I mean, it costs time, but it's free. And so if you're getting better sleep, then that can explain head to toe improvements. Now you throw in, well, okay, well, why are you getting better sleep? Right? Like that's the next legitimate question. And if it's getting into the mitochondria, which we know it is, it's working as the oxidative antioxidant that we know it can work as, then it's beneficial at the subcellular. We're not even talking about cellular benefits. We're talking about at the subcellular level, including an area where melatonin, the sleep hormone, is involved. This kind of wraps it all in a bow and can explain the skin improvements, the hair improvements, the nail improvements, really, really all of the improvements.
It seems like it'd be most beneficial for someone who's under heavy stress, whether it's physical, chemical, emotional, whatever form of stress it is. If you're under that and you're already going to be depleting your body's natural antioxidant reserves, something like this, a nice buffering agent will go in there and help keep the levels high naturally so that you're able to sleep better, perform better, work out better, recover better, all of the above.
All of it. Yeah. I can tell you if I've got a particularly taxing day, maybe I'm, back to back podcasts, I'll end up taking extra servings because it gives me that energy to kind of plow through those busy days.
It makes me think it's less of like a stimulating energy, like a caffeine or something, and more of like a steady, constant, unwavering energy that you feel when you're eating really clean, you're getting the right amount of exercise in, and you're staying within like that narrow band of like a hormetic like lifestyle.
That is what people report. And so just to because opposite of coffee, right? Coffee gives you the jitters. We've actually thought about marking it from a energy perspective and with a unique twist. Like so if we throw it together with a decaffeinated coffee, right? So you don't get the jitters or whatever. The thought process was, well, it's none of the caffeine, all of the energy, but then we also wanted to try and figure out how do you wrap in and twice the sleep. like it just like just it may be shocking enough that it catches some people's ear, but we really haven't gone down that path.
That's interesting. Okay, so the benefits that I'm seeing as potential things to research more into are the skin, hair, nails,
Yep.
the sleep, the energy, some focus, some I guess faster recovery if you're under like a heavy stress load. What else are you seeing?
Yeah, I'll give you two testimonials that I think are important. One of them is my own. So I am in fact the geeky scientist that you see in front of you. I have a spreadsheet of my migraines that goes back to 2014. I used to get 4 or 5 migraines a year, and the spreadsheet was to try and like figure it out. Like I fought with my girlfriend, or I ran too hard, or I drank too much the night before, or whatever, trying to isolate it because migraines. I don't know if you've ever had them, but they really, really
Yeah.
suck. Yeah, they're extremely painful. So I have that spreadsheet. I started taking the product on a regular basis. 2018, didn't get a single migraine. I get one, and they're really. I don't want to give too. I don't like qualitative testimonials. Oh, my migraines are less. Like I think that's too hard to know. So I do get one, maybe two a year. That's probably about where I sit right now.
Mm.
I will suggest that they are less, but don't, that they're less painful. I actually just work right through them basically. But I get the auras, right? So you get an aura, and then you get a throb. The throb used to last for days, like where I could bump my head and it would be painful. And that just doesn't happen anymore. You couple that with my wife. So my wife used to get 9+ migraines per month. And I always know the number 9 because she was on a medication. I think it's Sumatran or Subomatran, something close to that. But the doctors would only give her 9. Any migraine she had after 9, she would just have to suffer through or just do with like acetaminophen. When she started taking this on a regular basis, and it was not easy. It's how your spouse doesn't necessarily like, what do you know about this stuff? Um, as it turned out at the time, not much. As it turns out now, a lot more. And so I finally convinced her to take it, and she's down to she'll have a migraine a month or every other month from 9 plus. And so we do know that it crosses the blood-brain barrier, which at first is very nerve-wracking, right? So if you're a big pharma and you're like, it crosses the blood-brain barrier, there's a lot of things that make you nervous. When you put it in the context of these test subjects, the Wistar rats, live 90% longer. We've got tens of thousands of customers who are taking this product on a regular basis, and reporting benefits, then it kind of sets you at ease in terms of that. It ends up being something that can be beneficial. Again, if you're getting into the cells in the brain and improving the mitochondria, like that sounds like a win-win.
Exactly. I was just thinking, if it is able to cross the blood-brain barrier and it works similarly as it does in the rest of the body, it could have some potential neuroprotective benefits, which then also could translate into faster thinking, better idea generation, all kinds of different things for your average person who's healthy, and also your person who's concerned about long-term consequences of whatever unhealthy lifestyle habit they might be engaged in.
Yeah, yeah, no, those are definitely things that we'll be looking at in the years to come.
One thing I'm curious about is, how would this influence recovery from an injury or a wound or a surgery? I could see it either being beneficial because it, again, lessens the burden on the body, or at the same time interfering with like the necessary signaling that happens in order to make the repair happen fast.
Yeah. So and your concern is like, hey, if you're actually addressing inflammation, in
Yeah.
in an unnatural way, then that could be problematic. It's the same reason that I said, no, thank you, I'm not going to take 2 Advil twice a day. Like that's not the strategy that I think makes sense. I think I know this is a naturally occurring molecule. It's dissolved in olive oil. That's the product that we typically recommend, and as such, it's a very natural product. Now we do have to manufacture it at scale. It's got to be manufactured. What's interesting is a lot of people think, oh well, it's manufactured, and so like that's man-made or whatever. When you think in terms of like hormones, right? The complex nature of organic chemistry is that a right-handed molecule could have the exact same chemical structure, or chemical equation, right? The same number of atoms in it, but if it's right-handed versus left-handed, can have a different impact in the body. It turns out that this is one of the simplest kind of larger molecules available. It's 60 carbon atoms. There's nothing complicated in it. And when you put one of these together, it looks exactly like its neighbor, whether it was created from candle soot, whether it was created from lightning, whether you collected it from space. It's actually the KT boundary in the Earth, the boundary associated when the dinosaurs disappeared, has a higher concentration of C60 than other layers, right? So it is the same molecule no matter how you make it. So I think it's addressing positive. I'm trying to think about. I mean, we really only ever get positive testimonials, and we just have a slew of them. Close to me is my wife, who had a broken rib about a year and a half ago. She fell. She talks about healing. She burned herself. She's a little bit of a klutz, if I'm honest. And so she is regularly talking about how quickly she heals. That's so anecdotal, even more anecdotal than a collection of people. I would expect I would expect benefits. I mean, I can speak to, like, right now I've got a different knee pain, but I had, before I started taking this product, I played soccer, semi-professional soccer, for 25 years. Not the whole 25 years, like the last 3 years of the 25 I was semi-professional. And when I quit, I did have a knee pain that stuck with me. It was probably about 5 years, and then when I started taking this on a regular basis, that knee pain is just gone. I don't have that knee pain anymore. But I do have a knee pain on my other knee. So it's not, I'm not here to tell you that everything goes away and it's some sort of magic solution for everything. Although we get testimonials on so much, so it's really a weird place to be. Um, but I would expect benefits, right? And if I'm injured, I'll like acutely, then I will tend to take more.
Oh, okay. Are there any other research snippets or highlights that you want to bring to attention and discuss?
Yeah, so this is fascinating, and in the original study. So when I first had my director of research read that the University of Paris study, again, my lab provided the material, were mentioned in the original study. This is the study where the rats live twice as long. When my director of research read it, he said, "Listen, Chris, this could be 5 separate papers because there's 5 amazing things that are brought into this particular study." Actually, clicking right now, we're in the process of publishing a paper with the lead researcher, right? So this is pretty exciting. Like we are at the cutting edge of this. Um, so there's 5, could have been 5 papers. The 2 key points, and there's really 3, but I only want to talk about 2 right now. Is of course the extension, 90% extension of life, single longest longevity experimental result ever. And then the other one is a Wistar rat typically lives about 32 months, and they have a known amount of tumors in their body. So the longer they live, the more tumor mass they have in their bodies. Despite the fact that the MyVital C rats lived all the way out to 62 months, again, 90% longer, none of them had any tumors. So there were 0 tumors in a rat that should have had twice as many tumors as a normal rat, right? And some people hear that and go, cure for cancer. To which my response is no, no, that is not really what it says. There's a huge difference between dealing with a cancer that has metastasized and just being a cancer preventative. We know things as simple as good exercise, good sleep, good nutrition are cancer preventatives. And in this case, more specifically, tumor preventatives. That piece of the study just suggests that it has a positive impact as it relates to tumors. And there are patents related to really kind of, if you're thinking about consumption, ESS60 in animals as a cancer treatment, as part of a cancer treatment protocol. So there are some positive things that will probably happen. I can share this. In a petri dish, if you take healthy cells and cancerous cells and you introduce an anti-cancer agent, which is always a poison. Basically, it's a poison. Your goal is to poison the cancer before your healthy cells. If you introduce the ESS60 molecule, so now you've got healthy cells, cancer cells, and an ESS60 molecule, that anti-cancer agent is more efficacious against the cancer cells. So it kills the cancer cells faster and has protective effects for the healthy cells. Like, I don't know what's going on here, but it's amazing. And again, that's in a petri dish, very different than what's going to be required to kind of prove up benefits and kind of cancer protocols, et cetera.
Yeah, I want to switch gears a little bit. That reminds me, when I was doing my research into C60, I saw a lot of papers that showed great results. And then I also found some that were talking about the toxicity and dangers and that kind of thing. And from my own preliminary analysis, it looks like they were using like low quality industrial C60. And for some reason, like not designing and controlling the studies properly. And I'm guessing that's also part of the reason why C60 for health is not as well known.
I'll take like, it's my job to get out there and share this story with as many people as possible. And so I really take it as a very personal thing that I need to be doing a better job of getting this out to more people, because the testimonials are amazing. And how do we get this into more hands? I think, yeah, you hit the nail on the head. Every now and then we get customers, and I have a team of 5-star. We have 500 plus, probably more like 650 plus 5-star reviews for our customer service team, because they can answer almost any question people have when they call. And they get calls from time to time like, hey, this paper says detrimental effects. And really it boils down to this. C60 is for industrial applications. There's peer-reviewed published research that proves if you improperly process it, it's harmful. ESS60 is C60 that's been processed for safer human consumption. So one of the bigger ones, more recent, was, hey, when you expose it to light, it turns detrimental, has detrimental effects because the way the singlet, the way the negatively charged particle interacts with UV radiation. Well, if you look at that study, they said that the exposure to light was kind of typical. And we're like, yeah, typical if you take your olive oil solution, put it in your backyard for 3 weeks, right? So the sun can shine on it. Because they use these really, it's kind of like, imagine sticking it in an easy bake oven with a light bulb hovering right over it. That's not how you treat olive oil, and certainly isn't how we would recommend that you treat, our product, My Vital C, which is olive oil with the ESS60 molecule. So I feel like there was some sort of agenda in that particular research. I don't know what the agenda, I can't even fathom what it could possibly be. And so, but it's clear if you read the details in that particular paper. Is that one of the ones that you came across? Yeah,
that's one of them.
It's not representative of how you should treat the product. We get in the winter, it's an olive oil, so we ship, and if it's cold, it can coagulate. You just got to let it warm up, and it's fine. And in the summer, some people are like, hey, it's been in the 95-degree truck for a day and a half. Not a problem. Like that is not a problem for the product.
Yeah. Well, that's one thing I want to talk to you about also, is what to look for when you're buying a product, because this isn't like your vitamin C where it's fairly easy and straightforward. You can compare brands easily, and there might be some that are phytosome or liposomal or something like that, and that's a different camp. But there's so many different factors, and like you were saying with the light and the olive oil on its own oxidizes super easily when it's exposed to light and temperature and all these things. And that was one of my initial concerns when I was looking up most C60 products, is they use olive oil, and I couldn't understand why when there's more stable oils. But you briefly alluded to this earlier, that the olive oil product, the ESS60 olive oil, can hold more C60 basically. And then, so the things I want to discuss is like a buyer's guide. So why do you choose one oil over the other? What does sublimated mean? How do you compare dosages, or do you even know what kind of dose you want to match the research? The effects of light, temperature, humidity, and other things that can make the product you receive lower quality, can degrade the product. And then what's the difference between that, your product, and the DIY C60s you see on YouTube and other stuff? Because I'm guessing it requires machinery and very high purity, there's going to be problems with the DIY approach. But I just gave you a whole list of things, and I'm sure you won't remember it all. So we can go back and start one by one with, how do you choose which type? The MCT versus coconut oil, was it?
Yeah.
No, versus olive oil.
Well, let me start first with, things that concern me in the industry, and then we can talk about the oils.
Yeah.
So there's a company, and again, these are industrial C60 companies, and they have a gummy. And if you look at the quantity of the C60 in their case in the gummy, it doesn't like the gummies are huge. It's like Mondo gummies, and you've got to take 2 of them, and it still isn't getting to what we would consider to be a serving size. And I'll talk about serving size in a second. Probably 2 years ago, I found a C60 product on the market. They had put it in caplets. I think it was an oil. And according to their own concentration level, they were saying, hey, take 2 capsules or tablets a day, gel caps. And that equals like 1/10 of a serving, right? So it's just, and my concern is like, look, hopefully it's real C60, right? Hopefully they've processed it properly. But they're making a bad recommendation because people are going to try it. They're going to go, oh, I tried that stuff. And just like, even like ultra elite running champion, when he was, at his level, taking one serving and didn't really notice any impact on his running, like he could have just sworn off, right? And said, you know what, I tried those gel caps, they didn't work. So that bothers me, right? There's another situation where there's a company that's selling C60. You know those little Listerine things that you do for breath mints? They're the little paper thin and they melt as breath mints. Well, they're selling those as a C60 supply. Now, there's no volume, right? You're looking at, if you were able to condense olive oil, avocado oil, MCT oil into this, wafer thin piece and get the same like you'd have to eat the whole box, like, is the reality. So it's just not, it's definitely not good science, right? So there's even one company that used to say, and we'll get into this in a second, that all of their olive oil, avocado oil, and MCT oil had the exact same concentration, 0.8 milligrams per milliliter in all three. And then I have to suppose they started hearing me talk about it, because here's what the reality is. You can get about 0.8 milligrams per milliliter in olive oil, about 0.6 in avocado oil, and about 0.3 in MCT oil. There's some variability around this, right? Because these are naturally occurring products. MCT is the most consistent because it's just one chain, right? Or a couple of chains, medium chain. So there's some variability, but that's in general. So instead of just coming clean and saying, we don't know what we're doing, they actually changed their labeling. So now they do X milligrams per ounce. Ounce is a British unit. Milligrams is a metric unit. And the guy kind of bills himself as a scientist. The reality is no scientist would mix British units with metric units. So those are the things that have me concerned in the market. And I happen to actually cover the olive oil MCT, and so our recommendation is always olive oil for two reasons. The first is all the research is in olive oil. We're a research-based organization. Kind of stick to the facts, ma'am, right? Like, so it's in olive oil. The second reason is because the highest concentration is in the olive oil, about 0.8 milligrams per milliliter. And then my routine every day is I actually do kind of a bulletproof coffee thing in the morning. I've kind of laid off the ghee, but I'm putting our MCT in it, not just regular MCT, but our MCT in it. While that's blending, I'll take, and I usually do about a teaspoon and a half. I'll do a teaspoon and a half of our olive oil also, right? So now I've had it in my coffee. I've had it in a teaspoon. And then for lunch, I'm typically having a salad, and I'll throw our avocado product on our salad. So that's kind of my routine. Sublimation. This is actually related to the same company that has gummies that are probably underdosed and uses metric and British units together. Sublimation is a process where you actually take, so carbon is a black powder. And I actually did a video of this recently because we wanted to try and address this. And there's two kind of big concerns when it comes to sublimation. First, you take this black powder, it never turns to a liquid. Usually when you heat something up, it turns into a liquid and then into a gas. This you can just turn into a gas, and that's called sublimation. So you take a tube and you've got a vacuum pump on one end of this tube, and you put the powder in there and you heat it up. And then you have this vacuum sucking that powder as it vaporizes. So that vapor down the tube. And when it gets to a cold section where it will condense, it starts collecting, right? Not surprisingly, a lot of that material just skips right on down, goes down the middle of the tube, and goes out the vacuum pump. Like, that's just what happens. You lose about 50% of your material. So a sublimated product should be about twice as expensive as a regular product. These companies that are using sublimated products either are generously, when they shifted to sublimation, or at least they shifted their marketing to sublimation, should have increased their price, or at least shared with their audience, hey, this material is twice as expensive. We're just passing the savings. Like, we're not going to adjust our price, right? So they're not twice as expensive. So sublimation makes me nervous. The other piece is that sublimation is actually, once it's sublimed, it is actually the crystals are so incredibly tight that it makes it incredibly hard to dissolve into the different oils. So not only do you lose 50%, so it should be 50% more expensive, you should be mixing it for a lot longer. We tested 22 of the brands that are on the market, the C60 brands that are on the market, and there was one that met the spec. The rest of them didn't even meet the spec. Some of them as low as 10% of the amount of C60 in it that they said they had in it. Now, I'm very altruistic. I believe they were trying to do a good job. One of the things we realized in the early days, you take a 1 liter flask and you mix it oil, you put the powder in there and you mix it for 2 weeks. That was the protocol in the original study. Again, that study that used our material. What we realized is as we were ramping up production, when you went to larger and larger containers, the concentration was taking longer. So we're now mixing 3 weeks. I'm imagining those other companies who don't have the ability to do HPLC testing inside of their office. It's great to send it out and notice that it's under concentrated. But the reality is, because we've got the equipment in-house, because we're that lab, then we knew that we needed to increase the mix time. And so yeah, a lot of the products out there are just low and I'll often say woefully low in concentration. And then dosage. So interesting thing on dosage, if you were to just take the amount of oil, C60 in oil, or just the amount of C60 that you're going to consume on a kilogram basis compared to the rats, right? So we just say, hey, we gave them whatever, 0.1 per kilogram. And now because we're humans, we're going to do 0.1 per kilogram. You would have ended up taking a whole liter of olive oil, really, right? So not a whole liter, a whole cup, a whole US cup. Way too much, and it's actually an incorrect calculation. It's pretty simple. We know that the metabolism of the rat is very different than our metabolism, just like it's different from an elephant's metabolism. And it's well documented the right way to do these kind of translations is with what's called an allometric calculation. So allometrically, you're looking at their metabolism. By the way, I'm a geeky scientist. I love the fact that metabolism is associated with the surface area of the animal. So you take the surface area of the animal, and that gives you a factor to multiply it by. So you end up, in our case, at about 1 teaspoon, 5 mils per serving.
Isn't there like a heuristic you can use to convert between an approximate dose in mice to humans?
Yeah, I think there's probably just one. Like, I dug into the science because I really wanted to understand it. And so you got the allometric calculation, you've got this, surface area of the animal, and put that all together. But really, it's probably just just take their dosage per kilogram and multiply it by this number, and that ends up at the end of the day, that is how it worked out. But I dug into okay, why is this? How do they know this? What are the unique aspects of doing a conversion from a rat to a human study?
Yeah, then there's the whole issue of the storage and what it's exposed to. Like, make sure it's in like a dark container, I'm guessing. What's your take there?
Yeah, so really, if you just treat it like a good olive oil, right? You wouldn't leave olive oil in a cup in your backyard, right? You'd put it in your cool, dark pantry. All of our bottles are dark so that they filter out UV light. A typical olive oil and all of our oils in general will last about 3 years. And there's some thought process that the antioxidation capabilities of the ESS60 molecule will actually make the oil last even longer, right? So this could last longer. When we produce, we put 18 months from production date as the best buy date, right? So, and if you consume it as a regular person, at about a teaspoon a day, then you just won't bump into any issues. And we have, from time to time, again, part of the reason we have 650 plus 5-star reviews in our customer service, like, hey, I've got this old bottle, just send it back. We often, I don't want to announce that publicly, but we'll often, take your product, take it on a regular basis, but we'll often do the right thing for the customer.
Oh, that's nice. Thank you.
Yeah.
And then finally, what's the difference between ESS60 and DIY C60?
Oh, so if you are buying from our lab ESS60 and you're mixing it, you're just going through a lot more effort, right? If you're buying it from, I think a lot of people end up buying their product from China, like, just buyer beware. The thing that scares me about China, and there was when this supplement really took off, we actually ran out of stock of our own C60 product. And so we stopped selling it so that we could put it in our own oil, right? Like so that we could again further refine it, ESS60, put it in our own oil. And at that time, we actually flew to China and visited in China to try and understand, hey, what are the options over here? And visited a number of facilities, and we just weren't comfortable with how things worked, right? We weren't comfortable enough. So we actually, at great cost to us, just figured out how to ramp up our production, which took 6-9 months. And instead of picking up an inferior product, a product that made us nervous. I mean, I don't know if you know, but there was a baby formula that they were taking linoleum because linoleum, if you powderize it, looks like protein. So they're reaching the protein mark for for the baby food formula based off of linoleum, right? Like this makes me, it should make everyone nervous. Like
Yeah.
the quality of your source really makes a big difference.
Yeah, and I think with a lot of sources, you're much better off just skipping it altogether
Yeah.
than getting something that might actually do a lot more harm than good.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. It's one of the things like, listen, if you're going to put it in your body, do the research behind it. Don't go for the cheapest, right? Because you're putting it in your body. Um, and do a little bit of research and understand, what's the origin of this, and the origin story is pretty easy to find. And we've been manufacturing and selling this particular molecule since 1991.
Well, Chris, let's start to wind down. I am going to do some of my own research. I'm going to dig in more into the studies and figure out my take on it and how I can best use it. If people are interested in connecting with you and trying ESS60, how do they go about that?
Yeah, the best way we made a URL for your audience, so they can go to myvitalc.com/urban, right? They also can get a $15 off their initial order by using the coupon code urban. And what I'll recommend is when you land on that page, first they'll see your Mind Body Peak Performance podcast name and Keith Urban there. And then, excuse me, Nick Urban, not Keith Urban. I was like, that
Close
doesn't
enough.
sound right. So they'll see that on the top of the webpage. And when you go down, you can buy any one of our products. Again, what we recommend most is the olive oil. And if you get it on subscription, you save like 25%, right? Go ahead and take advantage of that. Even if you just want to try it, save it, you can cancel at any time. Like I've mentioned, our customer service team has 650 5-star reviews. They're not trained to talk you out of canceling your subscription. So don't worry about that. Just take advantage of that discount.
Thank you. I have to say I'm guilty. I do that a lot where I find a subscribe and say I subscribe and have it reorder every 10 months. And if I like it, then maybe I'll reorder. And if not, then just cancel.
Yeah,
So appreciate
exactly.
that being an option.
And to you, Nick, I want to offer, I'm happy to send you some product. Maybe it makes sense for us to, you try it for a little while and we reconvene and I don't know, in 45 days and you tell us what it's like to live twice as long.
Yeah. I hope I'm still alive in 45 days. Yes, that would be great. And I'm also now very aware that the MCT oil version, that carrier is far weaker. So
Yes.
that's a really important caveat. I think you said it's like 3 versus 10,
It's
whatever the unit was.
versus 0.3.
0.8 versus 0.3. Yeah. Okay. So that's good to know. I am all for MCT. I use C8 MCT virtually every day. But for a C60, I guess the olive oil it is.
Yep. Absolutely.
All right, Chris. Well, we will start to wind down. And since you're going to be back on the show, we will skip some of the questions. But first, if there was a burning of the books and all knowledge on earth was lost, which 3 teachers would you save the works of?
Oh, wow. Which 3 teachers? I tend to consume information very similar to how I consume music, which is I have no idea who the artist is often. I can tell you I'm listening to some really interesting kind of from the business perspective, right? Because my job now is to grow the business so that we can have a bigger reach and get this product to more people, right? And so there's this guy, Alex Hormozi, so you know of him, yeah.
Yeah.
He's pretty phenomenal. Like he's just pretty phenomenal. And I've really been turned on to him recently. I remember my first self-help book that my mom bought, and I actually need to have a conversation with her, like why she bought it for me, was Susan Jeffries, and it was Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway. And so that was my first self-help book, had a massive impact on how I viewed things, how I viewed like happiness and fear. Obviously, feel the fear and do it anyway. You know what? I really, really enjoy Sam Harris. I listen to a lot of Sam Harris. I actually have his meditation app um, called Waking Up, and he's just a phenomenal thinker. And I got to share this story. This is kind of funny. So he used to go on tour. You know, whatever kind of your religious proclivities are. He's an atheist and was on tour with Christopher Hitchens. And I just found these arguments fascinating. And one day I see Sam Harris and Harold Croto in the bill line for being on stage. And I'm like, well, Harold Croto, that's the name of this. There's no way, right? Like this C60 guy who was the astrophysicist, who was the reason of a business I started in college, is now here with this guy. Sam Harris has a great book called Moral Landscape, just phenomenal book. And that's the one that really kind of turned me on to him. And sure enough, it was the same Harold Croto hanging out with Sam Harris, a guy kind of found from another angle in kind of pursuits. But yeah, I think Sam Harris certainly sits way up there.
Very cool. Great list. All right. What is the parting thought or thoughts you'd like to leave listeners with today?
We're approaching what's called the terminal longevity, terminal velocity, right? And what that is, it's a concept that says every day we live a day, right? And every day medical community gets better at extending our lives, right? And at some point, the time the medical community can extend our lives beyond a day, then we will have surpassed the terminal velocity of aging, right? That means that we're not going to die. And I think that's actually something that's going to happen. I know that can be controversial, but I think that's going to happen some point. What that means is someday there'll be one person who will be the last person to die of natural causes. By the way, falling out of an airplane without a parachute, you're done. Like there's no Humpty Dumpty situation going on. That's not what we're talking about. We're just talking about natural causes. And it would really suck to be that last person to die of natural causes. And so do the right things. Do they, like the beginning of this podcast was like, what are the things, the non-negotiables for health? Get your exercise, get your sleep. It's so important. We didn't even really touch on that. There's an amazing book by Matthew Walker, Why We Sleep. I love to talk about that because sleep is so very important. Get your exercise, eat well, and have great relationships, and maybe you can be alive when we pass the terminal velocity of aging.
I love it. Yeah, and it's not selfish at all to want to live longer and have more time to give back and improve the quality of life for others, to help others out while you get to enjoy more time here also.
Yeah, I'm on board with that 100%.
Yeah. Well, Chris, it's been a blast chatting with you today.
Nick, thank you so much for having me.
Until next time, I'm Nick Urban here with Chris Burress, signing out from mindbodypeak.com. Have a great week and be an outlier. I hope that this has been helpful for you. If you enjoyed it, subscribe and hit the thumbs up. I love knowing who's in the 1% committed to reaching their full potential. Comment 1% below so that I know who you are. For all the resources and links, meet me on my website at mindbodypeak.com. I appreciate you and look forward to connecting with you. As a reminder, the information depicted in this video is for information purposes only. Please consult your primary healthcare professional before making any lifestyle changes.